Dealership manager refuses service to Republican man wearing MAGA hat, unaware he's the CEO. A car dealership manager, blinded by his personal biases, refuses service to a Republican man wearing a MAGA hat, completely unaware that he's the CEO. What unfolds is a dramatic twist, forcing everyone to rethink their actions as respect, professionalism, and justice take center stage. The Arizona sun beat down with relentless intensity on Scottsdale, the air shimmering above the manicured lawns and pristine streets. Sun Valley Motors, a dealership renowned for its luxury vehicles, stood gleaming, a testament to high-end commerce. Parked amidst the gleaming metal, a somewhat out-of-place pickup truck idled before its doors. Stepping out, Jack Reynolds, the CEO of the entire corporation, adjusted his faded baseball cap. It was a bright red one, emblazoned with a certain political slogan, a choice he knew would turn heads, a deliberate test. His attire was equally unassuming. Worn jeans, a simple polo shirt, and scuffed work boots. He wasn't here for fanfare. He was here to experience his business from the ground up as just another potential customer. He wanted to see, truly see, the service his dealerships provided. The hat, however, was the linchpin. Jack understood its power to provoke, to reveal biases. Today it was his undercover badge. He pushed through the automatic glass doors, the cool, conditioned air a stark contrast to the desert heat. The scent of rich leather and new car polish filled his nostrils. The showroom was a study in polished surfaces and strategic lighting, each vehicle displayed like a work of art. Sales associates, dressed in sharp suits, glided between the cars, their smiles practiced and professional. For a moment, he was just another face, observing. His gaze lingered on a stunning silver convertible, the sunlight catching its curves. Then, a young salesman, a hint of eagerness in his eyes, approached. "Good morning, sir. Anything in particular catching your eye today?" His name tag read Ethan. Jack offered a casual smile. "Just browsing for now, thanks." Before Ethan could engage further, a crisper, more authoritative voice cut through the quiet hum of the showroom. "Ethan, I'll take it from here." Jack turned to see a man approaching with a self-assured stride. His suit was tailored to perfection, his demeanor exuding an air of control. A small name tag identified him as Richard, the dealership manager. Richard's gaze flicked to Jack's hat, a flicker of something akin to distaste crossing his polished features before he composed himself. "Sir," Richard began, his tone polite but carrying an underlying edge, "I'm afraid we prioritize our services for clients who align with the values of our dealership." A knot tightened in Jack's gut, but his expression remained neutral. He simply raised an eyebrow, a silent prompt for Richard to continue. "And how do you ascertain that, exactly?" Jack asked, his voice calm, almost conversational. Richard's smile tightened, a mere stretching of lips that didn't reach his eyes. "It's a matter of maintaining a certain image, sir. Ensuring our clientele feels comfortable and amongst like-minded individuals." Jack held Richard's gaze, his own eyes steady and penetrating. "Interesting," he said softly, the single word carrying a weight that belied its brevity. He turned his attention back to the vehicles, moving slowly, deliberately, as if genuinely interested, though his mind was racing. The air around them had thickened, the pleasant showroom atmosphere replaced by a palpable tension. Richard's polished leather shoes clicked softly on the tiled floor as he shadowed Jack's movements, his posture growing increasingly rigid with each step. "Sir," Richard said, stepping directly into Jack's path, his voice now devoid of any pretense of politeness, a sharp impatience creeping in. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Jack stopped, tilting his head slightly, his gaze locking onto Richard's name tag for a fleeting moment before meeting his eyes. "Leave," Jack repeated, his voice even, betraying none of the anger that was beginning to simmer within him. "And on what grounds is that?" Richard crossed his arms, a gesture that spoke volumes of his perceived authority. "It's quite obvious you're not a serious buyer. We prefer to maintain an environment that reflects the sensibilities of our clientele. Your attire," he added, his gaze lingering pointedly on Jack's hat, a sneer subtly twisting his lips, "doesn't quite fit the image we strive for." A hush seemed to fall over the immediate vicinity. Ethan stood frozen near a display of brochures, his face a mask of discomfort. A couple browsing a nearby SUV suddenly found the intricacies of leather stitching utterly fascinating. Jack noticed the shift in the atmosphere, the uncomfortable glances, the unspoken disapproval radiating from Richard, but his own expression remained impassive. "I see," Jack replied, his voice measured, each word carefully enunciated. "And what image is that, Richard?" Richard hesitated for a fraction of a second, then leaned in slightly, lowering his voice as if sharing a confidence, though his eyes held a glint of disdain. "We cater to a more progressive clientele, one that appreciates certain values. We try to avoid unnecessary political distractions." A dry chuckle escaped Jack's lips. "Progressive and inclusive, except, of course, for those who might hold different political views." A flush crept up Richard's neck. "Sir, this isn't a political debate. I'm simply asking you to leave. Perhaps there's another dealership that would be a better fit for your preferences." Jack studied Richard for a long, silent moment, his gaze unwavering, dissecting. Then he glanced around the showroom, his eyes meeting Ethan's for a brief second. The young salesman looked away quickly, shame coloring his features. Several other staff members avoided eye contact altogether. A wave of disappointment, sharp and bitter, washed over Jack. Without another word, without a flicker of outward emotion, Jack turned on his heel and walked towards the entrance, the silence in the showroom heavy, thick with unspoken judgments and simmering resentment. The heavy glass doors hissed shut behind him, and Jack stepped back into the blazing sunlight. Richard exhaled sharply, adjusting his tie, the air of authority returning to his posture as he turned back to his staff. "All right, let's get back to work," he snapped, his tone brisk, dismissive. But beneath the forced confidence, a flicker of unease danced in his eyes, a subtle hint that perhaps, just perhaps, this encounter wasn't entirely over. Outside, Jack stood for a moment by his truck, the sun glinting off the hood. He leaned against the driver's side door, his gaze fixed on the dealership, his face unreadable. But behind those calm eyes, a storm of frustration and resolve was brewing. He wasn't just offended. He was deeply concerned. This wasn't just about him. It was about the culture festering within this dealership. A spark of something ignited within him, determination, resolve, a leader's instinct to correct a wrong. He climbed into his truck and drove away, leaving behind a showroom buzzing with nervous energy. The hum of Jack's truck faded into the Scottsdale traffic. Inside Sun Valley Motors, the air remained thick with the residue of the uncomfortable encounter. Richard retreated to his office, the echoes of his dismissive words hanging in the air like a stale scent. The rest of the staff resumed their duties, but the usual showroom energy was noticeably absent. Ethan, the young salesman, found himself lingering near the entrance, his brow furrowed in thought, glancing periodically towards the now empty space where Jack had stood. Meanwhile, Jack wasn't far away. Pulling into the parking lot of a nearby cafe, he decided to implement a tactic he often preached: observation. He ordered a coffee and found a table on the shaded patio, strategically positioned with a clear view of the dealership's entrance. From his vantage point, the internal dynamics of Sun Valley Motors unfolded like a poorly acted play. Richard emerged from his office, his interactions with customers and staff now tinged with a forced geniality. His smile seemed strained, his orders to employees delivered with an extra dose of sharpness. Ethan approached Richard hesitantly, a knot of anxiety visible in his posture. "Sir," Ethan began, keeping his voice low, his gaze darting nervously around the showroom. "Was it really necessary to ask that gentleman to leave? He seemed—" Richard cut him off, his expression hardening, his eyes narrowing. "Let me stop you right there, Ethan. People like him," Richard made a dismissive gesture towards the street where Jack had disappeared, "are not our target demographic. If you want to succeed here, you need to understand the kind of clientele we cultivate. Am I clear?" Ethan's cheeks flushed crimson. He nodded quickly, avoiding eye contact. "Yes, sir." The exchange hadn't gone unnoticed. A few other employees exchanged uneasy glances, their whispers hushed and furtive when Richard wasn't looking. It was evident that not everyone agreed with Richard's methods, but fear of reprisal kept their dissent silent. Richard ran a tight ship, and questioning his authority was not an option. Back at the cafe, Jack took a slow sip of his coffee, the bitter taste mirroring the sourness in his thoughts. His years in the corporate world had provided ample lessons in leadership, both good and bad. But what he'd witnessed at his own dealership struck a particularly raw nerve. Richard's biases weren't merely political. They were a blatant display of unprofessionalism, a disregard for basic human respect that could poison an entire organization from the inside out. Jack observed for nearly an hour, noting the subtle power dynamics. Employees avoided prolonged eye contact with Richard, their interactions stiff and formal. Customers came and went, most receiving the expected courteous treatment, but there was an undeniable air of superficiality, a transactional coldness. It was a showroom that prioritized image over genuine connection, a value system that Jack found deeply flawed. As the afternoon sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the street, Jack pulled out his phone. "Darlene, it's me," he said, his tone measured, all traces of the earlier casual demeanor gone. "Can you set up a conference call with Olivia Hayes, the regional manager for Sun Valley Motors, for tomorrow morning? I have some observations I need to discuss." Darlene, his longtime assistant, responded with her usual efficiency. "Of course, Mr. Reynolds. Anything else?" Jack glanced back at the dealership, its glass facade reflecting the fiery hues of the setting sun. "Just make sure she's prepared for some pointed questions." He ended the call, a sense of grim determination hardening his features. He started his truck, the engine rumbling to life, and pulled back into traffic, leaving behind a building that, beneath its gleaming surface, felt disturbingly fragile. What he'd witnessed wasn't an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a deeper malaise, a cultural rot that needed to be addressed, and addressed swiftly. The following morning dawned, the Arizona heat already beginning to build. But within the walls of Sun Valley Motors, a different kind of heat was simmering, a tension born of the unknown. Jack, having deliberately cleared his schedule, prepared for the conference call, the image of Richard's dismissive smirk still fresh in his mind. He reflected on the subtle but corrosive effects of Richard's leadership. The fear in Ethan's eyes, the forced smiles of the staff, the superficial interactions with customers. This wasn't just about lost sales. It was about lost potential, a stifled environment where good people couldn't thrive. At precisely 10 a.m., Jack dialed into the conference call. Olivia Hayes, the regional manager, joined promptly, her voice crisp and professional. "Good morning, Mr. Reynolds. I understand you had some concerns regarding Sun Valley Motors?" Jack leaned back in his chair, his tone calm but firm. "Good morning, Olivia. Yes, I visited the Scottsdale dealership yesterday, posing as a potential customer." A brief pause followed, the silence on Olivia's end palpable. "I see," she said, a hint of caution entering her voice. "And how was your experience?" "Enlightening," Jack replied, the single word laden with meaning. He proceeded to recount the events of the previous day, with meticulous detail, from Richard's initial dismissal based on his attire to the outright refusal of service. He described the palpable tension in the showroom, the discomfort of the staff, the overall toxic atmosphere. His words were factual, devoid of emotional outbursts, but the underlying gravity of his observations was unmistakable. Olivia listened intently, her only interruptions the occasional soft murmur of acknowledgement or the faint scratch of her pen on paper. When Jack concluded his account, Olivia cleared her throat, a hint of concern now coloring her professional tone. "Mr. Reynolds, I am truly sorry to hear about this. This behavior is absolutely unacceptable, and it doesn't reflect the standards we uphold." "Apologies are a start, Olivia," Jack replied, his voice steady, "but this isn't an isolated incident. It's a symptom of a larger problem within that dealership's management." Olivia hesitated, a sigh audible over the line. "You're right. We've had some rumblings about Richard's management style, but nothing this overt." "I need more than a review, Olivia," Jack stated firmly. "This requires direct action." Another pause. "What did you have in mind, Mr. Reynolds?" she asked, a note of apprehension creeping into her voice. I'll be visiting the dealership again this afternoon, Jack said, the resolve in his voice unwavering. This time as myself. I want to see how Richard responds when the CEO walks through the door, not as a perceived outsider, but as the head of the company. A stunned silence followed, broken only by the faint hum of the phone line. Understood, Mr. Reynolds, Olivia finally said, her voice now carrying a mix of apprehension and a sense of impending change. Jack ended the call, the weight of responsibility settling firmly on his shoulders. He wasn't just going to reprimand a manager. He was going to reshape the culture of an entire dealership. By 3 p.m., Jack's truck was pulling into the parking lot of Sun Valley Motors once more. This time, he walked through the doors with a different air about him. The casual attire was the same, the red hat still perched on his head, but his posture was straighter, his gaze sharper, radiating an undeniable aura of authority. A ripple of surprised recognition went through the staff. Ethan, mid-conversation with a customer, froze, his eyes widening in disbelief. Richard, emerging from his office with his usual air of self-importance, stopped dead in his tracks, his face paling visibly as he recognized the man from yesterday. The bravado he displayed just 24 hours earlier evaporated instantly. Mr. Reynolds, Richard stammered, the color draining from his face. I had no idea. Jack cut him off with a curt nod. My office, he said, his voice low and firm, brooking no argument. Now! A hush fell over the showroom as Jack followed a visibly shaken Richard into his office, the door clicking shut behind them, sealing off the stunned silence from the inevitable confrontation. Inside Richard's office, the air was thick with tension. Jack settled into a chair opposite Richard's desk, his gaze unwavering, piercing. Do you know why I'm here, Richard? He asked, his voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable weight. Richard swallowed hard, his hands fidgeting nervously on his desk. I assume it's about yesterday, sir. Jack leaned forward slightly, his calm demeanor giving way to a harder edge. It is about yesterday, Richard, but it's about a great deal more than that. Richard shifted uncomfortably in his seat, the weight of Jack's presence pressing down on him. Mr. Reynolds, he began, his voice trembling slightly, the forced confidence of the previous day utterly absent. I can assure you, sir, this is not how we typically operate. Yesterday was an exception. Jack's eyes narrowed, his lips thinning. An exception? That's an interesting choice of words, Richard, because what I witnessed yesterday was not an exception. It was a reflection of the culture you've fostered in this dealership. Richard opened his mouth to protest, but Jack raised a hand, silencing him. Let me be absolutely clear, Richard. I've spent decades building this company, not just as a profitable business, but as a standard of excellence, a testament to respect and integrity. Your behavior yesterday, your dismissive and prejudiced treatment of a potential customer, was not just unprofessional. It was a direct betrayal of those core values. Richard's face flushed a mottled red. I didn't know who you were, Sir, he blurted out, desperation lacing his voice. If I had known. Jack cut him off sharply, his voice like ice. And that, Richard, is precisely the problem. It shouldn't matter who I am. Every single person who walks through those doors deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their appearance, their beliefs, or your personal opinions. Richard looked down at his hands, shame and fear warring in his eyes, unable to meet Jack's unwavering gaze. The silence in the office stretched, heavy and unforgiving. Jack leaned back in his chair, his tone softening slightly, but losing none of its gravitas. Do you understand the damage your actions inflicted yesterday, Richard? Not just to potential sales, but to the reputation of this dealership, to the morale of your staff? You didn't just alienate me. You alienated every employee who witnessed your behavior and every customer who sensed the hostile atmosphere in that showroom. Richard finally looked up, his face a mask of shame and a flicker of defiance. With all due respect, sir, I was trying to maintain the image of this dealership. We have a certain reputation to uphold. Jack shook his head slowly, a profound disappointment etched on his face. A true reputation, Richard, isn't built on exclusion and prejudice. It's built on integrity, on treating everyone with fairness and respect. And yesterday, you demonstrated a complete lack of it. The silence returned, thick and suffocating. Jack allowed the weight of his words to sink in before continuing. Effective immediately, Richard, you are relieved of your duties. Olivia Hayes will oversee the transition until a new manager is appointed. Richard's eyes widened in shock, the color draining completely from his face. You're firing me? Just like that? Jack stood up, his expression resolute, unwavering. This isn't just about you, Richard. It's about setting a clear standard for every single person in this company. We do not tolerate discrimination, and we certainly do not tolerate arrogance masquerading as leadership. Richard slumped back in his chair, defeated, the fight gone out of him. Jack turned to leave, but paused at the door, turning back to face the disgraced manager. One last thing, Richard, he said, his voice firm but without malice. Take this as a profound lesson. Wherever you go next, remember this. Respect isn't optional. It's the very foundation of any successful business, and more importantly, of any decent human being. Without waiting for a response, Jack walked out of the office, leaving Richard to grapple with the devastating consequences of his choices in the suffocating silence. In the showroom, the staff had been holding their breath, a palpable tension hanging in the air. As Jack emerged from Richard's office, their faces were a mixture of apprehension, curiosity, and a flicker of hope. Jack addressed them directly, his voice clear and commanding, cutting through the hushed anticipation. I want all of you to hear this clearly, he said, his gaze sweeping across the assembled employees. This dealership, and this entire company, stands for respect, professionalism, and excellence. If any of you ever feel that those values are being compromised, you have my direct line. I expect nothing less than your unwavering commitment to these principles. Ethan, standing near the back, his face etched with relief, met Jack's gaze. Jack offered him a small, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement before turning and walking towards the exit. As he stepped back into the bright Arizona sunlight, a sense of purpose washed over him. The immediate problem had been addressed, but more importantly, a crucial message had been delivered, one that he hoped would resonate far beyond the walls of this single dealership. The news of Richard's abrupt departure spread through the dealership like wildfire, whispers and hushed conversations filling the air. For some, it was a moment of vindication, a long-awaited correction to a toxic work environment. For others, it was a stark reminder that no one, regardless of their position, was above accountability. By the late afternoon, Olivia Hayes arrived at Sun Valley Motors. Gathering the staff in the center of the showroom, she addressed them with a blend of empathy and firm resolve. Today marks a new beginning for this dealership, she announced, her voice ringing with conviction. We are here to rebuild, to refocus on what truly matters, our customers and each other. This isn't just about making sales. It's about creating a culture of respect, trust, and genuine professionalism. Her words resonated deeply with Ethan, who had spent the day processing the events. The image of Jack's calm authority, a stark contrast to Richard's arrogance. He stepped forward, a newfound courage in his bearing. I'd like to say something, he said, his voice surprisingly steady. Olivia nodded encouragingly. Ethan took a deep breath. I've worked here for over a year, and I've witnessed firsthand the negative impact of Mr. Harrison's approach. It affected everyone, customers and staff alike. Yesterday was incredibly uncomfortable, but seeing Mr. Reynolds step in like that, it gives me hope. Hope that things can genuinely change. Olivia smiled warmly, her approval evident. Thank you, Ethan. Real change begins with individuals like you, those who are willing to speak up and stand for what's right, even when it's difficult. In the weeks that followed, Sun Valley Motors underwent a significant transformation. Olivia implemented comprehensive training sessions focused on customer service excellence, cultural sensitivity, and team collaboration. The staff, freed from Richard's oppressive management, began to connect on a deeper level, fostering a sense of camaraderie and mutual respect. Ethan, in particular, flourished in the new environment. His inherent dedication and newfound confidence didn't go unnoticed, and Olivia took him under her wing, mentoring him in leadership principles. Within a few months, Ethan was promoted to assistant manager, a role he embraced with humility and a strong sense of responsibility. Meanwhile, word of Richard's dismissal and the subsequent events at Sun Valley Motors rippled through the entire corporation. Jack's decisive action served as a powerful message, prompting a company-wide initiative focused on reinforcing core values and fostering a more inclusive workplace. Workshops, town hall meetings, and anonymous feedback channels were introduced, ensuring that every employee, from the newest hire to senior executives, felt heard and valued. As for Jack, he continued his unannounced visits to dealerships across the country, his presence a constant reminder of the company's commitment to respect and integrity. While each encounter was unique, the underlying message remained consistent. Every customer matters, every employee matters, and respect is non-negotiable. Months after the initial incident, Jack made another unannounced visit to Sun Valley Motors. This time, the atmosphere was palpably different. He was greeted warmly by the staff, their smiles genuine, their interactions filled with a confident ease that had been absent before. Ethan approached him, extending a firm handshake and a sincere smile. "Mr. Reynolds, it's good to see you again." Jack smiled back, his eyes scanning the bustling showroom, the energy positive and vibrant. "It looks like things are running exceptionally well, Ethan." Ethan nodded, a hint of pride in his voice. "Thanks to the example you set, sir. Your actions really changed things for all of us." Jack's smile widened. "No, Ethan, you all did the hard work. I simply reminded you of the values you were already capable of upholding." The conversation was brief, but meaningful. As Jack left the dealership that day, a deep sense of satisfaction settled within him. The experience at Sun Valley Motors had been a powerful reminder of the profound impact of leadership, not just in correcting mistakes, but in inspiring genuine, lasting change. The story of what happened at Sun Valley Motors became more than just a corporate anecdote. It evolved into a compelling lesson in leadership, humility, and the far-reaching consequences of unchecked bias. Articles were written about the power of quiet leadership, and Jack's actions became a case study in addressing workplace toxicity with firmness, fairness, and compassion, without resorting to public shaming. For the employees of Sun Valley Motors, the lessons learned resonated deeply, extending beyond the workplace. Many began to reflect on their own biases and the ways they interacted with others. Ethan, now a respected assistant manager, often mentored new employees on the importance of treating every single customer with the utmost respect and courtesy, emphasizing that building genuine connections was as crucial as closing a sale. As for Richard, his departure from the company proved to be a turning point in his life. The months that followed were a humbling experience. He sought guidance, attended leadership seminars, and embarked on a difficult journey of self-reflection, confronting his own prejudices and reevaluating his understanding of what true leadership entailed. The road to redemption was challenging, but it ultimately led to a profound personal transformation. The positive ripple effects of Jack's intervention extended to the customer base as well. Sun Valley Motors gained a reputation as a dealership where everyone was truly welcome, regardless of their background or beliefs. Sales figures improved, employee satisfaction soared, and the Scottsdale location became a shining example for other dealerships within the corporation to emulate. In the end, the story of Sun Valley Motors wasn't just about a manager's poor judgment or a CEO's quiet authority. It was about the daily choices we make, the choice to listen, to understand, to respect, and to rise above our preconceived notions. It was about the courage to stand up for what is right, even when it is uncomfortable, and the willingness to offer grace and opportunity for genuine change. Jack's red hat, once a symbol of potential division within the pristine showroom, ultimately transformed into a potent symbol of something far more profound. It wasn't just about politics or personal preference. It became a testament to the power of humility, a stark reminder of the fundamental importance of respect, and a beacon signifying the unwavering belief that every individual, regardless of their role, their background, or their outward appearance, inherently deserves to be treated with dignity. This story underscores a crucial truth. True leadership isn't about wielding power. It's about recognizing the inherent worth in every human being. It highlights that genuine success isn't solely about financial gains or market share, but rather about building a culture rooted in empathy and fairness. As Jack often articulated in his addresses to employees and partners, his voice resonating with conviction. True success isn't measured by the number of cars we sell or the profits we generate. It's measured by the positive impact we have on the people we touch and the unwavering commitment to the values we uphold. Because, at the end of the day, fostering a culture of respect and understanding isn't just good ethics. It's the most powerful engine for genuine and sustainable progress.